Felix didn't mean to flirt with an alien queen. To be fair, he didn't mean to do a lot of things, like misplace a grant-funded exobiology drone in a methane geyser, or get banned from 3 spaceports for creative interpretation of customs forms. But here he was, 2 drinks deep at a dive bar orbiting a dying moon, staring at what he could only describe as the most intimidatingly radiant woman he'd ever seen. She sat in the corner booth like a thunderstorm dressed in velvet. Armor gleamed faintly under her cloak, polished and ornate with glyphs that shimmered like submerged stars. Her long ears, curved like crescent moons, twitched as if tracking the frequencies of other people's thoughts. Her eyes, golden and unreadable, scanned the bar like she was choosing which species annoyed her least. Felix, of course, took that as an invitation. "I give it 4 minutes before she vaporizes someone." Chip buzzed from Felix's wrist. The AI's tone was always dry, but tonight it sounded positively dehydrated. "5 credits, she's royalty," Felix muttered. "She has 2 bodyguards, 1 ceremonial blade, and a gravitational radius of pure contempt. She's either royalty or a very aggressive librarian." "You think she'd go for a human?" "I think your blood alcohol level is higher than your IQ right now." Felix knocked back the last of his synth whiskey and stood, brushing imaginary lint from his worn flight jacket. He didn't plan it. The line just popped into his head the way most of his decisions did, impulsively and with great future regretted potential. He could feel half the bar turn to watch him, most out of pity, a few in hopes of a public execution. He approached the booth with the confidence of a man who had nothing left to lose except dignity, and Felix had lost that somewhere around his 2nd year at the Xenolinguistics Institute. "Excuse me," he said, standing awkwardly in front of her. The 2 insectoid guards buzzed and shifted, but the queen, he was sure now, held up a hand. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing slightly. He cleared his throat. "Do you have a map? Because I keep getting lost in your eyes." There was silence. Not the awkward kind. This was the kind of silence that preceded cosmic disasters. The kind of silence that made stars sweat. Even the jukebox shorted out mid-song, as if refusing to provide a soundtrack for the impending violence. The queen stared at him. Felix stared back, trying very hard not to pee a little. Then something shifted. A subtle twitch of the lips. Her gaze dropped, just for a second. A shimmer of pink, barely perceptible, touched her cheeks. She smiled, shyly, the kind of smile that made Felix question everything he knew about first contact protocols. "Your line," she said in perfect Terran standard, voice like distant thunder filtered through velvet, "is astronomically inefficient. But novel." The bar exhaled in unison. Somewhere in the back, someone fainted. "Thank you," Felix said, genuinely surprised to still be alive. "I have worse ones if you'd like." She actually chuckled. It was the kind of sound that made Felix want to bottle it, label it Universal Diplomacy Aid, and sell it to the Intergalactic Council. "My name is Aravexa, Sovereign of the Elisine Concord," she said. "You may call me Your Majesty." Felix blinked. Well, that explains the murder glare aesthetic. She tilted her head again, intrigued. "And you are?" "Felix Martin, unemployed xenobiologist, failed diplomat, frequent flyer at regrettable bars." One of the guards made a clicking noise that sounded suspiciously like a laugh. Aravexa raised a slender brow. "Felix," she said slowly, as if tasting the word, "you are either very bold or very foolish. I find it's often both, sometimes in alternating sequence." She leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table, the subtle movement of her ears betraying amusement. "You have interrupted a sacred diplomatic sojourn to deliver a Terran mating phrase?" "Technically," he said, "I was dared by my AI." "You were dared?" "Yeah. He thought I'd get vaporized. So did I, to be fair. Bring him to me." "Who, Chip?" "Yes." Felix blinked. "You want to interrogate my AI?" She smiled again, less shy this time. "I want to understand how your logic matrix allowed this interaction to occur." "I'm not sure logic was involved." Before he could offer a defense, one of the guards pressed a button on his shoulder. A soft hum enveloped Felix, and he vanished in a flash of blue static. He reappeared aboard a ship. Not just any ship, a Zerelli capital vessel. Everything gleamed in soft, bioluminescent hues, like someone had crossbred a jellyfish with an opera house. He was suspended in midair inside a translucent stasis bubble. Chip was sputtering angrily from his wrist. "Nice going, Romeo. You got abducted. Again." A moment later, Aravexa stepped through a shimmering veil, now dressed in a flowing diplomatic robe that seemed to refract gravity. Her long ears twitched once more. "I believe we should continue our conversation," she said. Felix wiggled his fingers. "I'd offered to buy you a drink, but I appear to be trapped in a glowy soap bubble." She studied him. "I've crushed rebellions for less arrogance. And yet," he said, grinning, "here we are." There was a long pause, then she touched the edge of the bubble. It dissolved like mist. Felix landed with an undignified thump. "I have questions, Felix Martin of Terra. And I probably have unsatisfying answers, but go ahead." "Why did you speak to me like that?" "Because," he said, dusting himself off, "for a second, you looked like you didn't want to be a queen. You just looked lonely." Her expression faltered. "You presume much." "I usually do. It's part of my charm." "You're an idiot," she said almost fondly. "You'd be surprised how far that's gotten me." She walked away, motioning for him to follow. He did. Behind them, 100 diplomats screamed into void lines. Military fleets shifted into readiness, and headlines across 17 systems blared. "Zarelli Queen takes Terran prisoner, possibly dating him." Chip sighed. This is how galactic wars start, with pickup lines and pretty ears. Felix was pretty sure royal ships weren't supposed to have snack dispensers that sang opera when you press the button. "Is that Verdi?" he asked, eyebrows arched as a glowing pearl dropped into his palm. "It's a compressed nutrient sphere," Aravexa said without turning, "flavored with rare mycorrhizal extracts from the mist world of Telenar. The singing is to stimulate digestion." Felix popped it into his mouth anyway. "Tastes like spicy soap in denial. Do you have anything that screams jazz?" She stopped in front of an ornate, spiraling doorway that shimmered with multi-spectrum resonance. "Are you incapable of reverence?" "I'm excellent at reverence," Felix replied. "It's just usually for things like breakfast burritos and well-adjusted people." The door dissolved. Beyond it lay a chamber that defied geometry. The floor pulsed with gravitational tilts. Panels shifted orientation based on intention, and a mural of living light depicted the Elisan lineage. Tall, sharp-eared monarchs in impossible battle poses, probably choreographed by someone with a flair for drama and 6 extra elbows. "This is the Hall of Sovereigns," Aravexa said, walking toward the central pedestal. "My ancestors ruled not through blood, but by binding entire systems through oaths of clarity and strength. Every queen underwent the illumination, a ceremony where they revealed their true selves, without pretense, before the memory grove." "That sounds emotionally exhausting," Felix muttered, staring at a past queen who appeared to be sword-fighting a black hole. "Can't you just do a PowerPoint these days?" Aravexa ignored him. "Your presence here is problematic. You've disrupted protocol, unsettled my advisors, and somehow inspired a wave of populist memes suggesting I'm just a girl, standing in front of a boy, asking him not to get vaporized." Felix winced. "That one's on Chip." He leaked the moment. "I traced 12 unauthorized streams of our encounter within 2 minutes. Do you realize how many systems are now referring to you as the I Lost One?" "That's poetic," Felix said. "Sounds like a bad alt-rock album." "Diplomatic relations are hanging by a thread," she said sharply. "And yet, I find myself strangely curious about you." "That's the alcohol talking." "I metabolize ethanol in 3 seconds." "Ah, then it's probably the underlying trauma." She paused, staring at him. "I'm kidding. Mostly." She turned away and walked toward a small console made of flowing crystal. Her fingers moved across the interface, and the room responded. Light dimmed, air shifted, and a new projection emerged. It was Felix. Glitchy, looping holograms of his various expressions pulled from public security footage, station surveillance, and possibly one unfortunate mugshot where he mistook a customs bot for a snack machine. "Is this your idea of flirting?" he asked. "These are your behavioral patterns, erratic, disorganized, yet statistically consistent in producing disarmament reactions." Humor as a survival trait. It's gotten me out of 6 arrests, 3 space weddings, and 1 time loop. She studied the data silently, then turned to him. You're unremarkable by most metrics. Harsh, but your unpredictability is useful. Useful how? Felix asked. For what, a royal talent show? Interstellar comedy hour? To test the limits of connection. The Ellison Concord has grown stagnant. Diplomacy has calcified into ritual. You have disrupted my pattern. That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. I am not complimenting you. Still counts. She walked toward him, her expression unreadable. Up close, her long ears twitched again, barely perceptible, like tiny antennas unsure whether to flee or listen. I am not permitted to express personal preference. My role is bound to function. Well, Felix said softly, what if your function needs a vacation? She blinked. Like, he continued, a short sabbatical. A getaway. You, me, a neutral moon, zero geopolitics. Just one evening without responsibility. No declarations, no duties, maybe even a second bad pickup line. That is inadvisable, but not impossible. I should have you detained. You already did. I just made it awkwardly charming. She stared at him for a long moment. Fine, she said. One evening. For observation. Romantic observation. Anthropological. I'll take it. The pleasure moon of Varelos 3 was shaped like a giant floating pearl with LED anxiety. The atmosphere constantly shifted color based on ambient emotion. Right now it pulsed an uncomfortable magenta, indicating high awkwardness and mild attraction. Felix stepped out of the shuttle first, adjusting his collar. Chip muttered through his wristband. Are you aware that 7 intelligence agencies have placed bets on whether you survive this date? Felix grinned. What are the odds? Worse than your haircut. Aravexa emerged, dressed not in her usual regal attire, but a simple tunic woven with constellations. She looked almost casual, her guards shadowed from a distance, pretending not to panic. They wandered past gravity fountains, zero-G lounges, and a plaza where robotic poets offered verses based on scent. Aravexa sniffed one and received a sonnet about quantum longing. Felix sniffed another and got, "You smell like toast and misplaced ambition." I feel like that's fair, he said. They settled in a floating bubble cafe, sipping luminescent drinks that adjusted flavor based on mood. Aravex's flickered between citrus and stormwater. Felix's turned into something resembling regret and lime. This is the weirdest date I've ever been on, he said. I'm not sure what qualifies this as a date. There was mutual eye contact, a shuttle ride, and emotional beverages. That's 80% of modern courtship. She sipped. Then what comes next? Well, Felix said, usually there's a tragic misunderstanding, some light peril, a confession under duress, and if we're lucky, a dance. I do not dance. Neither do I. That's what makes it special. They stared at the stars together. Above them, satellites picked up their conversation, analysts broke into nervous sweats, and trending tags included, Grishna Queen lost, Yichorn Terran heartthrob, Onachurn, do you have a map part 2? Felix glanced at her. Seriously though, about the map. Aravexa raised a brow. You dare repeat it? He smiled. Only if you smile again. She looked away, ears twitching, and then, ever so slightly, she smiled. Felix had never been accused of destabilizing a monarchy before. But then again, he'd also never been invited to a memory grove by an alien queen with diplomatic immunity, a smirk that could derail peace talks, and ears that seemed to twitch every time he said something stupid, which was often. They arrived on Elisa Prime beneath a sky that looked like it had been painted by a moody AI with an affinity for impossible colors. Their shuttle descended past cloud layers that shimmered with passive biometric scans. The whole planet one massive, sentient archive. Chip informed Felix that every surface was recording. Felix responded by trying not to sneeze or say anything vaguely incriminating about cheese-based political structures. This place is incredible, he said, as they stepped onto the soft, moss-like path that led toward the crystal groves. It's like a giant living brain, except prettier, and less prone to conspiracy theories. Aravexa walked ahead, her cloak trailing light. The grove stores ancestral consciousness. Each crystal grows around memory fragments. When touched, they project the lived experience. Do they judge you? No, she said. They just remember everything, intimately, which is worse. Sounds like visiting my mother. She ignored that. Instead, she led him through glimmering corridors of violet and teal, the crystals humming softly like they were whispering secrets to each other. Some projected faint holograms, battles, coronations, children being taught the art of war with disturbingly elegant dance choreography. So, Felix said, tapping one carefully, is this the part where I meet your family? They are deceased. I meant holographically. Aravexa touched a shard embedded in a pedestal. The air shimmered, and a younger version of her, maybe 16, wide-eyed, stiff-backed, appeared before them, speaking a practiced oath in flawless high lisan. Her voice cracked halfway through. She winced and started over. Felix tilted his head. You had a nervous tick even then. It was my second coronation rehearsal that week. I had food poisoning, and the ceremonial robes were on fire. Wait, actually on fire? There was an incident involving a spice beetle and diplomatic embroidery thread. He watched the projection repeat its loop, the young Aravexa trying, failing, and trying again. You look terrified, he said softly. I was, she replied. That was the day I learned that perfection was expected, not requested. I once forgot to wear pants to a dissertation defense, Felix offered. She blinked. Was that a metaphor? No, just Tuesday. She stared at him. Then she laughed. It was sharp, sudden, unexpected, like a glitch in the atmosphere. Several crystals pulsed in response, capturing the sound and spinning it into their collective. I should not have brought you here, she said, still smiling faintly. Already the grove is gossiping. The crystals gossip? They reflect emotional resonance. Memories don't fade. They adapt. You've contaminated the archive with absurdity. Glad to leave my mark. They walked in silence for a while, passing memories like ancient ghosts. Then, without warning, Aravexa stopped. Do you trust me? Define trust. I need you to take part in a ritual. Is it dangerous? Only if you're dishonest. I'm naturally deceptive. That helps, right? She led him to a grove chamber surrounded by white crystals. A plinth rose from the center, bearing two mirrored cuffs. This is the resonance binding, she said. Two beings share fragments of memory without curation. It is used for council vetting, marriage ceremonies, or ideological negotiations. Wait, this is like alien therapy, but worse. You're allowed to opt out. Felix stared at her. Not a chance, he said. Let's trauma bond in high resolution. They both placed their hands into the cuffs. Light flared. Images erupted around them. Half-formed memories, sensations, fragments of feelings bleeding into one another. Felix saw her, 5 years old, hiding behind a throne during a treaty signing, terrified of being noticed. He saw her fingers shaking during her first execution order. He saw her watching a hologram of a distant nebula, wondering if anyone there had freedom. She saw him at 7, making a volcano in his backyard and accidentally destroying a neighbor's drone cat. She saw him alone in a research lab, pretending to talk to plants. She saw him crying in 0G after losing his job, then laughing 2 minutes later because his tear floated into his nose and nearly drowned him. They pulled their hands back. Silence. You had a pet named Snargle? It was more of a legally ambiguous fungus. Don't judge me. I understand you better now. Yeah, he said, me too. You've been alone a long time. So have you. She looked at him, ears twitching. Then the alarms went off. A booming voice echoed through the chamber. By order of the Jirelli High Council, Queen Aravexa is hereby summoned for emergency review. Suspected compromise of sovereignty. Terran influence confirmed. Initiating containment. Felix blinked. That's bad, right? She stood. They believe I've compromised my authority. I mean, you kinda did, with a pickup line. A section of the wall dissolved into a tactical display. A fleet was inbound, sharp black ships cutting through space like accusations. I can explain, Felix said. Poorly. With charts, they won't care. So what's the plan? We escape. Oh, good, or he said. Escape plans always go so well for me. She activated a hidden exit. They bolted through a corridor of collapsing illusions, memory projections flickering around them like judgmental ancestors. Your people take love very seriously, Felix said, dodging a falling beam of emotional guilt. This is not love, she replied. Right, he said. Of course not. They paused in a launch bay, catching their breath as drones swarmed behind. Just to clarify, Felix said, as she threw him into a small fighter pod, are we still on that anthropological date, or did we escalate to interstellar elopement? She sealed the hatch. Then through the comms, she said, Shut up, Felix. And for the first time, he didn't want to, but he smiled anyway. The escape pod smelled faintly of ozone and diplomatic scandal. Felix adjusted his seatbelt, which was more ceremonial ribbon than restraint system, and tried not to vomit as the pod corkscrewed through Elisa Prime's upper atmosphere. So, he said into the comm, voice an octave higher than usual. Just to review, we fled a sentient archive. We're now fugitives from the most feared council in the quadrant, and I may or may not be married to you due to memory-binding protocol misinterpretation. Technically, Aravexa replied from the pilot's chair in the main vessel ahead, you're classified as an unvetted consort, which means your execution would be inconvenient. That's the closest I've ever come to a romantic declaration, she sighed. Focus. On what? I don't even know where we're going. To a place outside council jurisdiction, a planet so diplomatically obscure that it was removed from all maps after insulting 5 galactic ministers with a cheese-based insult generator. You're taking me to Space New Jersey. She didn't dignify that with a response. Their ships broke orbit, gliding into the shadow of a nebula that shimmered like the inside of a highly opinionated oyster. Chip buzzed from Felix's wrist. Do you have any idea how many laws you violated in the past 6 hours? Technically, I haven't read the Elisan legal code, which makes this legally worse. Aravex's voice interrupted. Prepare for slipstream entry. Do not engage with the interface. Do not touch anything glowing. And for the love of every star cluster, do not attempt to steer. Got it, Felix said. Don't be helpful. The stars stretched like taffy dipped in logic. Space blinked. Then they dropped out above a planet shaped like a lopsided egg wrapped in aurora ribbons. Orbiting it was a single outpost, rusted and chaotic, with neon signs blinking in 7 incompatible alphabets. Welcome to Null Point, Aravexa said, where bureaucracy fears to tread. They landed with minimal combustion. Aravexa stepped out first, dressed this time in a cloak so nondescript it almost erased her presence. Felix followed in a jacket borrowed from the ship's emergency wardrobe. A glittery green ensemble that made him look like a cocktail lounge exploded. Blends right in, he muttered. Here, absurdity is camouflage, she said. As they walked into the outpost, Felix spotted at least 4 bounty posters with his face on them, one of which was misspelled as Felix the Romantic Threat. A furry 3-eyed vendor waved a skewer. Want kebab of questionable origin? No thanks, Felix said. I had anxiety for breakfast. They ducked into a cramped bar called the Quantum Maybe, where the drinks menu changed if you looked at it too long. Aravexa ordered something with a name made entirely of punctuation. Felix got a sparkling beverage called Unresolved Childhood Issue. They took a booth near the back. This won't hold the council for long, Aravexa said. They'll find us. They'll challenge my authority. So challenge them first. That's not how our system works. Then maybe it's broken. She didn't argue. Instead, she pulled up a holographic thread from her wrist, a personal chronostream. Felix watched as her life unfolded in fragmented moments. Battles, speeches, moments alone with her hands trembling behind her back. You were never allowed to be anything else, he said. Emotion is considered inefficiency. That's the most efficient nonsense I've ever heard. She looked at him, long ears flicking slightly. I don't know how to fix any of this. Well, he said, I do have a plan. Oh, stars, that's never good. He grinned. We host a summit. A summit. Not a real one. A fake summit. A distraction summit. We leak it to the right people. You'll be seen addressing the issue head on. Meanwhile, Chip and I sneak into the Council's central archive and reframe the memory binding as a diplomatic innovation rather than an emotional breach. You want to rewrite the narrative. Exactly. You keep your crown. I keep my neck. Everybody wins. This is absurd. Your ears are twitching again. That means you're interested. She glared, but not convincingly. This would require convincing the council I'm experimenting with Terran-style diplomacy. We'll call it emotionally adaptive governance. Make it sound like it came out of a 12-dimensional think tank. She paused. I'd need someone to demonstrate it with me. I know a guy, he said, raising a hand. This will involve dancing. I rescind my offer. She smiled. Too late. The summit took place 3 days later aboard a borrowed diplomatic cruiser refitted by enthusiastic null-point engineers who thought subtlety was a seasoning. Felix wore a sash that said Authorized Heart Representative. Aravexa wore ceremonial robes laced with binary poetry. Council members tuned in via secure stream. Most were suspicious. Some were confused. One appeared to be asleep in a tank of nutrient foam. Aravexa began with a speech about the need for new forms of connection, the dangers of tradition calcifying into tyranny, and the unquantifiable strength of laughter. Felix stood beside her, nodding like a malfunctioning assistant. Then came the demonstration. It involved a 3-minute guided trust fall, a duet about misunderstanding planetary customs, and an awkward hover dance that ended with Felix tripping into a dessert table and declaring it performance art. The audience was stunned. Then, applause, followed by panic, followed by an emergency vote to establish a committee on experimental diplomacy. Later, as they watched the replay, Aravexa sipped her drink and said, "You are, without question, the strangest creature I've ever aligned myself with." "And yet," Felix said, "you keep smiling." She didn't deny it. Outside, Null Point's sky flickered with gossip satellites and ships carrying newly curious diplomats. The galaxy, against all odds, had begun to laugh again. Felix had no idea how many intergalactic subcommittees he'd accidentally joined. Somewhere around 12 by Chip's count, though one was technically a cult and 3 were informal think tanks based on recreational cheese metaphors. He now held the honorary title of Terran Liaison of Emotional Innovation, which mostly meant he had to wear a sash that glowed based on mood, a feature that betrayed him constantly. Today it pulsed soft pink. Aravexa claimed it meant calm engagement. Chip insisted it meant infatuated confusion. Felix insisted it meant low blood sugar. They sat together on a rotating orbital garden, the kind that defied physics out of sheer botanical arrogance. It was one of the Queen's personal sanctuaries, recently reopened to the public as part of a transparency initiative that included 2-way confession pods and a surprisingly popular empathy fountain. "Remember when you tried to flirt and almost caused a civil war?" Aravexa asked, not looking up from her tablet. "I remember you smiling like it was the first time you weren't carrying the galaxy on your shoulders." "You exaggerate. You deny." She didn't respond. Instead, she turned the tablet toward him. It displayed a resolution passed unanimously by the High Council, unprecedented, given that one member usually abstained on principle. The resolution established the Council's first cross-species, emotional insight forum, with an annual symposium led by Aravexa and Felix. "So," he said, "we're officially teaching space diplomacy through interpretive dance and bad jokes." "Not officially." "Unofficially, then." A gardener drone whirred by, offering a nutrient smoothie. Felix declined. Aravexa accepted one, then promptly gave it to Felix, who tried to protest until he tasted it and realized it was mango-flavored ambrosia. "I'm not sure how I got here," he said after a moment. "You insulted a queen with a pickup line," she replied. "Technically complimented, the insult was implied. You disrupted protocol, manipulated public perception, broke into council archives, and staged a fake summit. And you let me." She didn't answer immediately, then quietly, "You reminded me that control is not the same as strength." Felix leaned back. "You used to talk like a textbook. Now you sound like someone who's been listening to pop songs and feeling feelings. I downloaded 3,000 Terran cultural files to prepare for your summit stunt. Unfortunately, most were music videos. That explains your recent obsession with moody lighting and shoulder pads." "I've grown," she said simply. So have I, Felix admitted. I used to think making people laugh was enough, but I never thought it could change systems, shift how empires work. Your humor cuts where logic avoids. Careful, that almost sounded like a compliment. She reached over and flicked his glowing sash, which turned briefly violet. Chip, Felix said, tapping his wrist. What's violet mean? Emotional vulnerability disguised as banter, Chip answered instantly. Betrayer. Aravexa stood and extended a hand. There's still a ceremony left. Oh no. Oh yes. You've been summoned by the Grand Tribunal of Ridiculous Incidents. Sounds fake. It's very real. And they've voted to canonize your original pickup line as a protected diplomatic artifact. Felix blinked. You mean? She smiled, a real one, long ears twitching like they always did when she was pretending not to enjoy herself. You'll have to recite it, officially, in front of delegates from 12 species. I'm never living this down. You started it. Felix sighed, stood, and took her hand. They walked through the garden as gravity subtly tilted to match their path. I used to think I was just a guy with jokes, he said. Now you're a guy with consequences. I hate it here. No, you don't. He didn't. Not anymore. At the ceremony under a dome of refracted starlight, Felix stood before the delegation. He cleared his throat, adjusted his sash, and grinned like a fool who somehow convinced an empire to reconsider the value of laughter. Do you have a map? He said, voice echoing. Because I keep getting lost in your eyes. The hall erupted, not in mockery but applause. Aravexa stood beside him, resplendent in ceremonial robes with shoulder pads borrowed from the Terran Music Archive. Her ears twitched. She didn't look away this time. And for the first time in 1,000 cycles, a queen's reign was marked not by fear, but by the possibility that even the smallest absurdity, spoken by the most unlikely fool, could become the beginning of peace. Felix turned to her, lowering his voice. So, next diplomatic summit? Aravexa raised an eyebrow. Snacks first, then jokes. Deal.